I'm telling you, we didn't do anything, all right? We came out here, and it was already like that.
Now, slow down. Hands where I can see them.
They're up, okay? But you're not hearing me. I was just trying to help her. That's it.
I don't... Ma'am, take a breath. We'll get to you in a second.
You can check me, search me, whatever.
I don't have anything on me.
We called you, remember?
Then let me figure out what happened. Keep your voice down.
Right.
Amber? Amber. The 911 operator's voice was lost in a sea of screams and static. In a small, quiet town in New Mexico, a frantic call had just shattered the peace. A 14-year-old girl named Kiana was on the line, her voice shaking with pure terror. She told the police that her friend, 13-year-old Amber Archuleta, had just been shot. The story was shocking. A black SUV had supposedly sped by the house and opened fire in a sudden drive-by shooting. When the police arrived, they found 3 kids standing in the yard, looking completely lost in the middle of a nightmare. They were crying, yelling, and begging for help. It looked like a terrible tragedy that could happen to anyone. But as the detectives looked closer at the kids in the yard, they started to feel like something was wrong. The kids were acting very strange. One of them was very angry and would not listen to the officers. Behind their scared faces, there seemed to be a secret that was much darker than a drive-by shooting. The police were about to find out that the truth was hidden inside the house, and these innocent kids knew exactly what had happened. Sheriff Grady Holt didn't wait for his car to come to a full stop before he jumped out. His heart was pounding against his chest as he ran toward the driveway. The air was filled with the sound of a boy screaming for help, a sound so sharp it made Holt's skin crawl. He saw the girl lying on the ground, and even from a distance, he could tell the situation was dire. 44, I'm on the scene. Get those medics here now, he barked into his radio. As he reached the group, the chaos was overwhelming. Toby was pacing back and forth, his hands covered in dirt and something darker, yelling that they needed to hurry up. Holt ignored the noise and knelt beside Amber. He could see the wound near her eye. It was deep and gushing. He immediately started CPR, his hands moving in a steady rhythm as he tried to keep her heart beating. Every second felt like an hour. Holt looked up at the teens, his eyes searching theirs for any bit of useful information. Was anyone else here? Did you see the car? He asked between breaths. Toby just kept pointing toward the road, shouting about a black SUV that had vanished into the trees. Holt wanted to believe them, but as he worked to save Amber's life, he couldn't shake the feeling that the kids were standing too close, watching him with eyes that were more nervous than sad. He kept pushing, kept fighting for her, but the silence from the road behind him was starting to feel heavy. The air in the driveway felt thick with tension as Toby Marsh paced in circles, his eyes darting between the sheriff and the dying girl. Every time Sheriff Holt tried to ask a question, Toby would bark back, his voice cracking with a strange mix of anger and fear. Why are you just standing there? Do your job. Toby yelled, his face turning red as he gestured wildly at the officers. When Holt asked for his name or any kind of ID, Toby didn't act like a scared kid, he acted like someone who was under attack. I'm underage. Does it look like I have an ID? I'm 14, he snapped, crossing his arms and glaring at the bodycam lens. Holt stepped closer, trying to keep his voice calm, but Toby wouldn't back down. He kept shouting over the sheriff, demanding to know where the ambulance was and blaming the police for not moving fast enough. It wasn't the way a normal witness acts when their friend is hurt. Toby was being aggressive and loud, almost as if he was trying to fill the quiet with noise so nobody could think clearly. His hands were shaking, but his words were sharp and full of bite. As he watched Toby's explosive reaction, Sheriff Holt realized this wasn't just a boy in shock. Toby was fighting for control of the situation, and his anger felt like a shield designed to keep the truth from coming out. Sheriff Holt stood on the asphalt of the rural road, his eyes scanning the ground with a flashlight. He was looking for what every drive-by shooting leaves behind, broken glass from a car window or brass shell casings from a gun. But as he walked back and forth along the front of the property, the road was perfectly clean. There were no skid marks from tires and no signs that a vehicle had sped away in a hurry. He looked back at the driveway where Toby and the others were standing. Their story about a black SUV didn't match what he saw on the ground. If someone had shot at them from a car, there should be evidence out here. Instead, the scene was strangely quiet. Holt noticed that the gate to the house was closed, and the kids seemed more worried about the police looking around than they were about the phantom shooter returning. These red flags were starting to pile up. The sheriff realized that if the bullets didn't come from the road, they had to have come from somewhere else, somewhere much closer than the teenagers wanted to admit. As Sheriff Holt stood by the road, he heard the front door of the house creak open. A fourth boy walked out into the daylight, and the entire energy of the scene changed in an instant. This boy wasn't screaming like Toby, he was quiet, but his arm and the front of his shirt were soaked in bright red blood. Until that very second, the officers didn't even know there was anyone else inside the house. The teenagers had told Holt they were all outside when the shooting happened, but this new boy was living proof that they were lying. The sheriff's heart sank as he realized the blood on the boy's clothes didn't come from standing near a drive-by, it came from being right next to the person who pulled the trigger. Holt signaled for his partners to secure the new witness. The phantom black SUV was forgotten. The investigation had just shifted from a roadside emergency to a crime that happened behind closed doors. The presence of the bloodied boy was the crack in the wall of silence that Holt needed, and he knew that once they started asking questions about what happened inside, the kids' stories would fall apart. With the blood-covered boy now secured, Sheriff Holt knew he couldn't wait for the teens to tell the truth. He had to see the crime scene for himself. State Police. Announce yourself if you're in here. Holt shouted as he and his team stepped through the front door. The house was quiet, but the air felt heavy and wrong. As they moved through the hallway, Holt kept his eyes on the floor. He was looking for any sign of a struggle or the phantom shooter the kids had described. Instead of finding evidence of someone breaking in, he found signs of a messy, hurried cleanup. There were strange smears on the kitchen floor that looked like someone had tried to wipe away blood in a panic. The kitchen didn't look like a place where a drive-by had happened, it looked like the spot where the real story began. Every room they cleared brought more questions. The innocent home was actually a maze of secrets, and as Holt moved deeper into the house, he realized that the teenagers hadn't just witnessed a crime, they had tried to erase it before the police ever arrived. As Sheriff Holt and his team continued their search inside the house, they stepped into the bedrooms, and what they found was truly alarming. Instead of a normal family home, it felt more like a dangerous warehouse. In just one back bedroom, Holt counted 7 or 8 different guns lying around. None of them were in a safe, and none of them had locks on them. The weapons were everywhere, on tables, in closets, and even on the counters where any child could reach them. It was a parent's worst nightmare and a police officer's biggest red flag. Holt realized that Toby didn't have to look hard to find a weapon, the house was filled with them, left out like they were ordinary toys. Seeing so many unsecured guns made the drive-by story feel even more like a lie. It was now clear that the danger hadn't come from a car passing by on the street, it had been sitting right there in the house, waiting for someone to pick it up. The investigation came to a sudden halt when a truck pulled into the driveway. William Brown, the owner of the house and Toby's father, jumped out. He looked at the police cars and the yellow tape with anger in his eyes. Instead of asking how he could help, he immediately told the detectives to leave his property. "You don't have a warrant. Step out of my house now," William shouted. Sheriff Holt tried to explain that they were in the middle of a life-saving investigation, but William wouldn't listen. He told the officers that he had already called a lawyer and that no one in his house would be saying another word. This was a huge problem for Holt. By forcing the police to leave, William was giving the kids time to talk to each other and perfect their lies. It also gave someone a chance to hide more evidence. Holt had to step back and wait for a judge to sign a search warrant, but he knew every minute they waited was a minute the truth was being washed away. The father's arrival didn't feel like a parent protecting his child, it felt like a man trying to bury a secret. Sheriff Holt knew he had to act fast before the teens could get their stories perfectly straight. Since they couldn't search the house yet, he decided to move the children to separate police cars. He wanted to divide and conquer. By keeping them apart, they couldn't whisper to each other or give secret signals about what to say next. Holt put Kiana in one car and Frankie in another. He left Toby for last, noticing how the boy's eyes followed his friends as they were led away. Without his friends nearby to back up his loud shouting, Toby started to look a lot less like a tough talker and a lot more like a nervous kid. Holt sat down with each of them one by one, asking the same questions over and over. He knew that if the drive-by was a lie, their stories would eventually start to look different. It was a waiting game now, and the sheriff was betting that the pressure of being alone would finally make someone tell the truth about what happened inside that kitchen. Sheriff Holt sat across from Kiana in the back of the patrol car. The air was cold, and the only sound was the distant hum of the car's engine. Kiana looked small, her shoulders hunched up to her ears as she stared at her feet. Holt didn't yell, he just spoke softly, telling her that he knew she was a good person who had just seen something very scary. He explained that the drive-by story didn't make sense because the road was too clean. For a long time, Kiana didn't say anything. She just picked at a loose thread on her sleeve. But as Holt continued to talk about Amber and how she deserved the truth, Kiana's eyes filled with tears. She finally looked up, her voice a tiny whisper. "We weren't outside," she admitted. The wall of silence had finally cracked. She told the sheriff that they had all been hanging out in the kitchen before the shooting happened. They were laughing and joking, just being normal kids, until Toby did something that changed everything. She described the kitchen table, the goats they had seen earlier in the yard, and the sudden shift in the room's energy. As she spoke, the phantom black SUV completely disappeared from the story. The truth was finally coming out, and it was a secret that started right inside Toby's house. Kiana took a deep breath and told Sheriff Holt about the moment the fun turned into a nightmare. She said they were all standing in the kitchen when Toby suddenly reached out and picked up a gun from the counter. It was a revolver, the kind with a barrel that spins around. Toby wasn't angry at first, he was just messing around with the weapon like it was a toy. He started waving it around while they were all laughing and joking. Kiana remembered feeling a little bit nervous. She told the sheriff that she even warned Toby to stop, saying, "Dog, don't even be doing that because it could be loaded." But Toby didn't listen. He kept playing with the heavy metal gun, clicking it and pointing it at different things in the room. The air in the kitchen, which had been full of music and talk just a minute ago, suddenly felt very cold and dangerous as Toby pointed the barrel toward their friend. Everything happened so fast that Kiana said she didn't even have time to scream. 1 second, they were all talking, and the next, Toby had the revolver pointed right at Amber's face. Amber didn't look scared at first, she actually reached out her hand, trying to push the gun away from her nose like it was a joke that had gone too far. Then, there was a loud bang. A small flash of light filled the kitchen, and the smell of smoke was everywhere. Amber didn't say a word, she just fell straight to the floor. Kiana watched in horror as her friend started to bleed right there on the kitchen tiles. The room went from noisy to deathly quiet in a heartbeat. Toby stood there with the gun in his hand, looking at what he had done, while Kiana and Frankie frozen in place, unable to believe that their friend was gone. It wasn't a drive-by, and it wasn't a stranger, it was a mistake made in their own kitchen that they could never take back. After the gun went off, the kitchen became a place of pure panic. Toby didn't call for help right away. Instead of thinking about saving Amber, he started thinking about how to save himself. He looked at Kiana and Frankie and told them they had to help him. He didn't want anyone to know the truth about what happened inside the house. Toby grabbed Amber by her arms and began to drag her across the floor. He pulled her out of the kitchen and through the house, leaving a trail behind. His plan was to move her all the way to the edge of the road. He told his friends that they were going to tell the police a lie. He wanted them to say that a black SUV had driven by and shot her while they were all standing outside. He even threatened that he would unalive himself because he was so scared of getting in trouble. Under his pressure, the other kids helped move her to the roadside, setting the stage for the fake drive-by story they told when the first sirens finally appeared in the distance. While Toby was busy moving Amber toward the road, he knew he had to hide what had happened inside. The kitchen was a mess of evidence that proved the shooting didn't happen outside. While the other kids were in shock, Toby grabbed a mop from the bathroom and started scrubbing the kitchen floor. He worked in a frantic rush, trying to wash away the blood before anyone arrived. He even tried to use the kitchen sink to clean up the mess. When the police finally walked into the house later, they didn't find a clean floor. Instead, they saw smeared blood that looked like it had been wiped around in a hurry. Holt's team followed the trail and found the blood-stained mop still sitting in the bathroom, wet and hidden behind the door. It was a horrifying discovery. It proved that Toby wasn't just a witness, he was someone who had tried to erase the truth while his friend was fighting for her life. Based on the evidence and the stories from Kiana and Frankie, Sheriff Holt knew he had enough to arrest Toby. When the officers moved in to take him into custody, the killer teen didn't go quietly. Toby's calm mask finally broke, and he began to fight back. He was swinging his arms and struggling as the police tried to put him in the patrol unit. Even while he was being arrested, Toby didn't seem to feel bad for what he had done to Amber. Instead, he was angry at the police for catching him. He yelled and kicked, making it very difficult for the officers to follow their rules for a safe arrest. As they walked him down the street toward the police car, the neighborhood watched in shock. The boy who had claimed to be a witness was now being taken away in handcuffs. Toby's reaction showed the detectives his true nature. He was more worried about his own freedom than the life of the friend he had shot in the kitchen. After arresting Toby, Sheriff Holt turned his attention to William Brown. The investigation had revealed a shocking truth. Toby didn't have to break into a locked cabinet or find a hidden key to get the gun. The revolver was sitting out in the open, ready to be picked up. Sheriff Holt explained to William that in New Mexico, there is a special rule called Benny's Law. This law says that adults are responsible if they leave a gun where a child can easily grab it and hurt someone. Holt told William that because his guns were not secured, his son was able to cause a terrible tragedy. William tried to argue, saying he was just a father trying to protect his home, but the law was clear. The police placed William in handcuffs, too. He was charged with making a firearm accessible to a minor and with trying to stop the police from doing their jobs. It was a hard lesson for the community to see. A parent's mistake in the home had led to a life being lost on the street. The scene at the edge of the driveway finally began to quiet down as the sun started to set. The yellow crime scene tape fluttered in the breeze, marking the boundary where a group of friends' lives had changed forever. Amber was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, the damage from the revolver leaving her future uncertain. In the end, the truth was far more tragic than the lie. There was no mysterious black SUV, no drive-by shooter, and no external threat. The danger had been inside the house all along, fueled by a mix of teenage recklessness and a parent's negligence. Toby sat in the back of a transport vehicle, his aggressive shouting finally replaced by a heavy, hollow silence. As Sheriff Holt watched the taillights of the last patrol car fade into the distance, he knew that while the case was technically closed, the scars left behind on this small community would take a lifetime to heal.